Somewhere among the roughly 8 billion people alive right now, there is exactly one person who sits furthest from average on almost every measurable trait. The statistical needle in the haystack of our entire species. Today, we're going to build that person from scratch, using nothing but real, documented human biology. No guessing. Every number you're about to hear is a real, published estimate. Let's start with something almost embarrassingly simple, just to warm up the math. Our person is born on February 29th, a leap day. Since leap years occur roughly once every 4 years, the odds of being born on that specific date are about 1 in 1,461. Nothing biological going on yet, just calendar math. But it's the first small improbability we're going to stack on top of everything else, and stacking is the whole game here. Every independent trait we add multiplies the odds against the last one. Now let's make this person's blood genuinely one of a kind. There are 8 common blood types most people learn about in school, but underneath those, there's something far rarer, called Rh-null. People with Rh-null blood are missing every single Rh antigen on their red blood cells. All of them. It was first identified in 1961 in an Aboriginal Australian woman, and to this day, researchers estimate it shows up in roughly 1 in 6 million people. Fewer than 50 people with confirmed Rh-null blood have ever been documented worldwide. Doctors sometimes call it golden blood, because it can be safely given to almost anyone with a rare blood type. But Rh-null people themselves can only safely receive blood from other Rh-null donors. There are only a handful of active donors on the entire planet. Multiplying that in with our leap day birthday, our person's odds of existing just dropped to roughly 1 in 8.8 billion. Now let's give them something you can't see on an X-ray or even in a blood test, a hidden genetic quirk that happens to double as a kind of built-in immune advantage. It's called the CCR5 delta 32 mutation. Normally, HIV uses a receptor called CCR5 to enter human immune cells. Some people inherit one mutated copy of the gene that builds this receptor, which offers partial protection. But a much smaller number of people inherit 2 mutated copies, one from each parent, which can make them almost completely resistant to most strains of HIV. Among people of European descent, researchers estimate roughly 1% carry 2 copies of this mutation. This isn't just theoretical, it's the same genetic trait behind the so-called Berlin patient, the first person ever functionally cured of HIV after receiving a bone marrow transplant from a donor who happened to carry this exact double mutation. Combine that with our first 2 traits, and our person's odds of existing just fell to roughly 1 in 880 billion. Let's give them one more sense most people don't have. Perfect pitch. Also called absolute pitch, this is the ability to identify or reproduce a musical note without any reference tone at all. Hearing a random sound and instantly knowing correctly, that's a D sharp. Researchers estimate it shows up in roughly 1 in 10,000 people, and while it's more common among trained musicians and people raised speaking tonal languages, it remains genuinely rare in the general population, and scientists still don't fully agree on how much of it is innate versus trained during a narrow childhood window. That brings our combined odds down to roughly 1 in 8.8 quadrillion. For our final trait, let's flip our person's internal organs. Literally. It's called situs inversus totalis, a condition where a person's major organs are arranged as a mirror image of the typical layout. Heart on the right side of the chest instead of the left, liver on the left instead of the right, and so on, all the way through the chest and abdomen. It's almost always harmless, and plenty of people live their entire lives never knowing they have it until an unrelated X-ray or scan reveals it by accident. It's estimated to occur in roughly 1 in 10,000 people. Add that in, and our combined odds of this exact person existing land at roughly 1 in 87.7 quintillion. Let's actually sit with how big that number is. Scientists studying global ant populations published a detailed count in 2022, sampling data from every continent on Earth. Their estimate, roughly 20 quadrillion ants alive on the planet at any given moment. That's already a genuinely difficult number to picture. Our final probability is so much larger that you'd need the entire current ant population of planet Earth to exist about 4,383 separate times over just to match it. Now, an honest pause here because good science means being upfront about the limits of what we just did. We calculated this final number by multiplying 5 independent probabilities together, and that only works cleanly if the traits genuinely don't influence each other at all. In real biology, that's a simplification. Some traits can cluster within certain populations or families in ways pure multiplication doesn't capture perfectly. So treat that final number as a genuinely useful illustration of just how staggeringly specific a single human being can be, not a peer-reviewed calculation of one exact person's odds. And here's a detail worth sitting with. We only used 5 traits. We didn't touch fingerprint patterns, which are unique to each individual anyway. We didn't touch the roughly 1 in a million people born with an extra rib, or people with natural genetic resistance to certain other diseases, or dozens of other rare inherited quirks scattered across human biology. We could keep stacking traits for another 10 videos and still not run out, which is really the actual point buried underneath all this math. You don't need Rh-null blood or perfect pitch to be, statistically, a wildly improbable event. Your specific combination of genes, timing, environment, and experiences was never going to happen twice. Somewhere in the sheer scale of 8 billion people, the math says extraordinary rarity is guaranteed to exist. It just usually happens to belong to someone you'll never meet. Except, this time, it might be worth remembering. The odds were never actually about someone else. They were about you the entire time.